The Ulian crewmen doubled over in uproarious laughter as the minuscule human vessel shakily docked at Antares Station, looking like a child's toy next to the sleek alien behemoths. Captain Dennis Cook sat rigidly at the controls of humanity's finest long-range explorer, the UES Polaris. Advanced by Earth standards, the Polaris appeared hopelessly primitive compared to the cavernous Ulian trading posts sprawling before him. Dennis had one critical mission here: secure access to the invaluable raw materials abundant in Ulian space. The future prosperity, even survival, of Earth's far-flung colonies depended on it. Ulian snickering echoed through the Polaris's hull, and especially loud guffaws stung Dennis's ears. "Look at that puny ship! Humans really think they're ready to play in the big leagues?" The laughter crescendoed. Dennis gritted his teeth. With effort, Dennis donned a diplomatic smile as he strode through the Polaris's airlock into the bustling hangar. In his crisp blue uniform, he looked like a minnow in an ocean of strange alien forms. He swallowed hard as a towering Ulian approached, his hulking frame exuding dominance. "Captain Cook, I presume?" The Ulian looked down his flaring nostrils at Dennis. "I am Overlord Antares, master of this station. Come." Trailing behind the much taller alien, Dennis struggled to keep pace as Antares led him through dizzying metallic corridors. The station was unlike anything Dennis had seen, a shining testament to Ulian technological superiority. His jaw clenched as he realized just how outmatched humanity was here. Antares ushered Dennis into an expansive office. The Ulian settled himself behind an enormous desk, folding his multiple limbs. Dennis stood awkwardly, feeling like an unwelcome supplicant. "So, Captain?" Antares leaned back, his tone heavy with condescension. "Your species wishes access to Ulian mining territories?" Amusement glinted in his compound eyes. "How quaint." Dennis squared his shoulders. "With respect, Overlord Antares, an alliance would be mutually beneficial. Earth can offer nothing of value to the Ulian Empire." Antares cut him off sharply. "Your civilization is millennia behind ours. There is nothing you could provide that we cannot already." A shrill alarm pierced the air, pulsating red lights flashing through the office. Antares scowled, jabbing a button on his desk. A panicked Ulian voice crackled over the comm. "Overlord, distress signal from Mining Outpost 6. They're under Vox attack. Defenses failing, requesting immediate assistance." Antares pounded a fist on the desktop, his scales rippling with rage. "Feckless cowards, attacking our outposts again. But our warships are spread too thin. We cannot reach the outpost in time. We'll have to abandon it to those Vox scum." He glanced dismissively at Dennis. "Now where were we?" "Wait!" An idea sparked in Dennis's mind, a desperate plan taking shape. He leaned forward intently. "The Polaris can respond." Antares barked a short, harsh laugh. "Your ship? Against the Vox Raiders? Don't be absurd. They'd swat you like a gnat." "We're fast and maneuverable. We can reach your outpost, evacuate the Ulians there, maybe even hold off the Vox until—" "Enough!" Antares' tail lashed. "I will not entrust Ulian lives to some upstart ape and his toy ship. This is not your concern." A fire ignited in Dennis's eyes. "It became my concern when your people needed help. And if humanity can provide that help, then that's exactly what we'll do." He turned on his heel and strode from the office, his heart pounding, purpose crystallizing with each step. Minutes later, Dennis was back aboard the Polaris, rapidly briefing his crew on their new mission. Jaws clenched as the scale of the challenge sunk in. The Vox were deadly marauders, armed with weapons that could split the Polaris like firewood. This would be like pitting cavemen against a fighter jet. But Dennis had no choice. Innocent Ulians would die without him. If he failed, Earth would lose any chance of being seen as worthy allies. Humanity's future in the stars could be forever dimmed. Yet, if he succeeded, if this lone human ship could save the Ulians, that their own mighty warships could not, everything would change. Perceptions would shift. Humanity would be seen in a new light by the galaxy's great powers. The road to true partnership and prosperity for Earth's colonies could open. The stakes had never been higher, the odds never lower. But Dennis felt a strange calm descend as he engaged the Polaris's thrusters. Let the Ullians mock them. Let the Vox underestimate them. This was humanity's moment, and Dennis would ensure that when the galaxy looked back on this day, what they would remember is not how they laughed at that tiny human ship, but how that ship, against all odds, saved them all. The Polaris shuddered as it decelerated from FTL speed, the besieged Ullian outpost materializing before them like a bloodied prizefighter on the ropes. Dennis Cook's eyes narrowed as he took in the chaotic scene through the view screen. A cluster of angular, predatory Vox ships swarmed the outpost, unleashing relentless torrents of plasma fire. The outpost's shields flickered and strained, threatening to buckle at any moment. "Jesus," muttered Navigator Jimenez, her squeezing hard on the console. "Those Vox aren't playing around." Dennis leaned forward, his gaze zeroing in on the outpost's main reactor, visible as a pulsing blue orb at the structure's heart. The Vox ships were concentrating their bombardment there, seeking to pierce the shielding and trigger a catastrophic meltdown. "They're going for the reactor," Dennis said tightly. "If they breach it, the whole outpost goes up." He studied the Vox formation, searching for vulnerabilities. The raiders were built for frontal assaults, their heavy armaments and reinforced prows designed to pummel targets into submission. But Dennis noted the relatively thin armor along their flanks and rear, an unconventional approach hitting them from an unexpected angle. It could work. "Jimenez, prep the decoy drones, full spread," Dennis ordered, his mind racing. "Kowalski, ready the proximity mines and stand by to fire on my mark." Jimenez and Kowalski chorused their acknowledgement as Dennis gripped the helm, adrenaline surging through his veins. This was a desperate play, but there was no alternative. They had to act now or watch the outpost burn. "Launch drones!" A dozen small, agile drones burst from the Polaris's launch tubes, streaking toward the Vox ships. The Raiders' point defense lasers swiveled to track the new threats, momentarily distracted from the beleaguered outpost. Seizing the window, Dennis gunned the thrusters and sent the Polaris hurtling forward, hugging tight to the outpost hull. The human ship darted beneath the Vox vessels, so close Dennis could see the alien crews through their observation ports, their startled expressions almost comical. But there was no time to savor their shock. Dennis angled the Polaris toward the largest Vox ship's stern, where tangled conduits and exhaust ports marred the sleek hull. "Kowalski now!" Kowalski's hands danced over his console, and a volley of proximity mines streaked from the Polaris tubes. The small, deadly spheres arced through space and disappeared into the Vox ship's exposed rear ports. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a series of muffled booms echoed through the void, and gouts of flame erupted from the Vox ship's engines. Secondary detonations chained through its hull as the mines wreaked havoc within, tearing through power systems and bulkheads. The raider lurched drunkenly, its weapons falling silent. "Pull us back," Dennis yelled, wrenching the Polaris into a steep climb away from the stricken Vox ship. Moments later, the Raider's reactor containment failed, and the vessel vanished in a blinding fireball that shook the Polaris like a leaf in a hurricane. As the glare faded, Dennis saw the remaining Vox ships breaking formation, scattering like roaches exposed to sudden light. They'd clearly never expected this level of resistance from a lone human ship. "Outpost actual. This is Polaris actual," Dennis called over the comm, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Prepare to engage the enemy on my signal. Let's hit them while they're off balance." "Acknowledged, Polaris," came the reply, the Ullian commander's voice tinged with disbelief and growing hope. "Readying all remaining defenses for coordinated strike." Dennis felt a fierce grin tug at his lips as he swung the Polaris around to face the disorganized Vox raiders. For so long, humanity had been the underdogs, dismissed and underestimated by the galaxy's greater powers. But today, here and now, they would show the Ullians, the Vox, and anyone else watching that humans were not to be trifled with. That despite their humble beginnings, they had the courage, ingenuity, and sheer audacity to stand toe-to-toe with the cosmos predators and make them blink. "All hands, battle stations," Dennis called, his voice ringing through the Polaris. "Let's show these bastards what humans are made of." And with that, the Polaris surged forward, the Ulian outpost at its side, charging headlong into the fray. The Vox ships, still reeling, tried to rally, but it was too late. Ulian and human weaponry slammed into them from all sides, tearing through hulls and turning the once fearsome raiders into drifting, shattered husks. Within minutes, it was over. The last Vox ship, trailing smoke and debris, limped away, fleeing for the safety of FTL. A ragged cheer erupted over the comm channels as Ulians and humans alike savored their improbable victory. But even as he basked in the moment, Dennis knew this was only the beginning. The Vox would not forget this humiliation, and they would seek revenge. And the Ulians, for all their gratitude, were still an enigma, their true motives and intentions unclear. The road ahead would be long and treacherous, filled with challenges that would test humanity to its limits. But as Dennis looked out at the battered but unbroken Ulian outpost and felt the steady thrum of the Polaris's engines beneath him, he felt a deep, unwavering conviction. Come what may, humanity would face the trials ahead with the same unwavering spirit and unconquerable will that had brought them this far. And no matter how dark the night or daunting the odds, they would endure, adapt, and overcome as they always had. For that was the essence of what it meant to be human. And in a galaxy of wonders and terrors, it was the greatest strength of all. The Polaris streaked through hyperspace, its hull thrumming with the strain of sustained FTL travel. Dennis sat rigid in the captain's chair, his thoughts churning as they approached the Ulian capital world. The victory against the Vox Raiders still felt surreal, like a fever dream born of desperation and adrenaline. As they dropped out of hyperspace, Dennis's jaw went slack. The Ulian homeworld hung before them, a gleaming sapphire orb wreathed in orbital stations and shipyards. But amid the technological marvels, signs of recent battle scarred the void. Debris fields cluttered orbits, and the twisted hulks of destroyed ships drifted silently. "My God," Jimenez breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the devastation. "How many attacks have there been?" Before Dennis could respond, a priority transmission crackled through the comms. "Polaris, this is Ulian Control. You are cleared for immediate landing at the High Command spaceport. The Council awaits your arrival." Minutes later, Dennis strode through cavernous halls lined with towering statues of Ulian heroes. Ulian officials rushed past, their faces etched with worry. Holographic displays showed real-time battles unfolding across Ulian space. Dozens of outposts and colonies under siege by Vox Raiders. The doors to the council chamber hissed open, revealing a circular room dominated by a massive holotable. Ulian military leaders clustered around it, their scales rippling with agitation as they pored over tactical displays. A statuesque Ulian turned to face Dennis, her emerald scales shimmering in the dim light. "Captain Cook," she said, her voice rich and resonant. "I am High Chancellor Xyrillian. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival." Dennis inclined his head respectfully. "Chancellor, I came as quickly as I could." Xyrillian gestured to the holotable. "Please join us. We have much to discuss." As Dennis approached, the full scale of the Vox attacks became clear. Red icons swarmed across the map, methodically tearing through Ulian defenses. "By all logic, your ship should have been annihilated," and grizzled Ulian admiral growled. "Yet you not only survived, but drove off an entire Vox battle group. How?" Dennis explained the unorthodox tactics they'd employed, from the decoy drones to the proximity mine gambit. As he spoke, he noticed the Ulians exchanging meaningful glances. When he finished, Xyrillian leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Captain Cook, what I'm about to tell you is known to only a handful outside this room. We've been engaged in a shadow war with the Vox for years. Their numbers and ferocity make them nearly impossible to stop through conventional means." She paused, her gaze boring into Dennis. which is why I'm proposing a military alliance between our civilizations. Dennis blinked, stunned. Chancellor, I'm honored, but Earth's forces are a fraction of your fleet's size. We can't hope to match your firepower. Perhaps not, Xyrilian conceded, but you possess something we lack, the innovative thinking that allowed your tiny ship to defeat an entire Vox squadron. We propose embedding human crews and tacticians aboard our vessels. Your unorthodox strategies, combined with our technology, could give us the edge we need. Dennis's mind raced. This was an unprecedented opportunity for humanity to prove itself on the galactic stage. But the stakes were impossibly high. Chancellor, he said carefully, I'll need to consult with my superiors, but speaking for myself, I believe we can help each other, but I have one condition. Cyrilian's head tilted. Go on. Full membership and equal rights for Earth's colonies among Ullian worlds. We've been denied that for too long due to our perceived insignificance. The council chamber erupted in hisses and mutters, but Cyrilian silenced them with a raised hand. She studied Dennis for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. Let this be the dawn of a new era for both our peoples. Days later, Dennis stood on the bridge of the Ullian dreadnought Stormbreaker, watching as human crew members integrated with their Ullian counterparts. The ship hummed with nervous energy as they prepared to ship out on their first joint mission. A junior officer rushed up, his scales pale. Captain Cook, urgent message from High Command. Dennis snatched the datapad, his blood running cold as he read. The Vox, enraged by the new human-Ullian alliance, were massing for an all-out invasion of Ullian space. He looked up at the expectant faces of his human and Ullian crew. They were about to face the fight of their lives, with two civilizations hanging in the balance. All hands, Dennis called, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. Battle stations. We have work to do. Dennis stood on the bridge of the Stormbreaker, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The ship vibrated subtly as it slipped through hyperspace, carrying its human Ullian strike force deep into Vox territory. 5 minutes to emergence, the Ullian navigator announced, her scales rippling with tension. Dennis nodded, his teeth gritted. All hands, final prep. We've got one shot at this. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Intelligence had pinpointed a massive Vox shipyard hidden in an asteroid belt, churning out next-generation dreadnoughts for the impending invasion. Their mission, infiltrate and destroy it. As the Stormbreaker dropped out of hyperspace, Dennis activated the holodisguise. The sleek warship shimmered, its profile morphing into that of a lumbering merchant hauler. Vox Control, this is Freighter Araxis, Dennis transmitted, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him, requesting docking clearance for resupply. Tense seconds ticked by before a guttural voice responded. Araxis, transmit cargo manifest and proceed to docking bay 7. Dennis exhaled slowly as they glided past Vox patrol ships. The disguise held. They were in. The Stormbreaker touched down in a cavernous hangar carved from the asteroid's core. Through the viewports, Dennis saw Vox work crews swarming over half-completed dreadnoughts. The new ships dwarfed anything in the Ullian fleet, jam-packed with weaponry that could shatter planets. Now, Dennis breathed. The strike team burst from concealed hatches, catching the Vox security forces completely off guard. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as human and Ullian commandos cut down the defenders with ruthless efficiency. Dennis sprinted for the command center, his boots clanging on metal catwalks. They had minutes, maybe less, before a klaxon blared, drowning out the sounds of battle. Dennis cursed. They've triggered the alarm. Move, move! He burst into the command center, his rifle sweeping the room. A Vox overseer lunged for a console, but Dennis dropped him with a precise burst. Plant the charges, Dennis roared. We're on the clock. His team fanned out, attaching high-yield explosives to critical systems. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified as Vox reinforcements poured in. Dennis's comm crackled. Sir, Ullian forces are engaged, but we're getting overwhelmed. We need more time. Acknowledged, Dennis replied grimly. He turned to his human squad. With me. We're taking the fight to them. They raced through the shipyard's outer decks, planting additional charges as they went. Dennis's mind raced, calculating blast radii and structural weak points. A scream pierced the din. One of his operatives lay motionless, a detonator just beyond his outstretched hand. Dennis didn't hesitate. He sprinted into the open, plasma bolts sizzling past. Pain lanced through his shoulder as a shot grazed him, but he scooped up the detonator and rolled behind cover. All teams, fall back, Dennis shouted. 30 seconds to detonation. The human Ullian force began a fighting retreat, buying precious seconds with their lives. Dennis limped aboard the Stormbreaker, clutching his wounded shoulder. Go, 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 he yelled as the last of his team stumbled up the ramp. The Stormbreaker's engines roared to life. As they cleared the hangar, Dennis thumbed the detonator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a chain of explosions rippled through the shipyard. Vast sections of the asteroid disintegrated, venting atmosphere and debris into space. The incomplete dreadnoughts shattered, their mighty hulls peeling apart like paper. Direct hit on the reactor core, someone shouted. Dennis shielded his eyes as a miniature sun bloomed in the asteroid field. When the glare faded, only twisted wreckage remained where the shipyard had been. As they limped back to Ullian space, reports flooded in. The raid had crippled the Vox war machine, buying precious time for the defenders. Word of the audacious strike spread like wildfire. When they docked at the Ullian capital, crowds of cheering Ullians greeted them. Dennis saw awe and respect in their alien eyes, no longer dismissing humans as insignificant upstarts. Chancellor Xyrillian herself met them at the airlock. Captain Cook, she said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. You and your people have done the impossible. The Ullian people owe you a great debt. Before Dennis could reply, an aide rushed up, his scales pale. Chancellor, urgent news. Our long-range scouts report massive Vox fleet movements. They're massing for an all-out assault. Xyrillian's expression hardened. She turned to Dennis. It seems the Vox are even more formidable than we feared. We need your tactical brilliance now more than ever. She paused, then continued. I'm promoting you to oversee the defense of the Carillion system. It's a key strategic linchpin. If it falls, our entire defensive line crumbles. Dennis felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He nodded grimly. I'll do everything in my power to hold the line, Chancellor. As he strode towards the war room, Dennis's mind raced. They'd bloodied the Vox nose, but the real battle was just beginning. He'd need every ounce of human ingenuity and Ullian courage to face the storm that was coming. The fate of two civilizations now rested in his hands. Hands. The tactical display on the Stormbreaker's bridge erupted with countless red icons, blanketing the Carillion system. Dennis's eyes widened as he took in the sheer scale of the Vox armada bearing down on them. By the stars, Lieutenant Kira breathed, her scales pale. There must be tens of thousands of ships. Dennis's face hardened as he assessed their meager defenses. A patchwork fleet of human and Ullian vessels formed a thin line against the oncoming tide. He keyed the fleet-wide comm. All ships, this is Captain Cook. We knew this day would come. Now we show these bastards what we're made of. Initiate Gambit Omega. The human Ullian fleet split into smaller task forces, each adopting unconventional formations. As the first wave of Vox ships slammed into their lines, Dennis's unorthodox tactics threw the enemy into disarray. Feint Alpha, execute, Dennis barked. A wing of Ullian cruisers abruptly broke formation, appearing to flee. The Vox pursuers fell right into the trap, running headlong into a minefield of cloaked human proximity weapons. Explosions rippled across space as Dennis's forces struck from unexpected vectors. But for every Vox ship they destroyed, 5 more took its place. Sir, an officer shouted. Civilian transports are away, but we've got enemy troops touching down in the main spaceport. Dennis nodded grimly. Dispatch boarding teams. We buy those civilians every second we can. He watched as shuttles streaked towards the Vox flagships. Many were blown apart, but some made it through. Tense minutes ticked by as the infiltration teams worked their deadly magic. Suddenly, 3 massive Vox dreadnoughts went dark, their systems failing. A cheer went up on the bridge, but Dennis knew it wouldn't be enough. The respite was short-lived. A blinding barrage from the Vox capital ships tore through their defensive line. Ships disintegrated under the onslaught, and a priority distress call crackled through. "Mayday, this is Chancellor Zerillion. We've taken heavy damage, multiple hull breaches." The transmission cut off as another salvo struck the Ullian flagship. Dennis watched in horror as the proud vessel broke apart. With the Zerillion gone and their forces in tatters, Dennis made the hardest call of his life. "All ships, this is Captain Cook. Initiate full retreat. I repeat, full retreat." As the remnants of the fleet turned to flee, Dennis saw Vox dropships descending on the helpless civilians left behind. His hands tightened on the command console. "Helm, set collision course for that Vox dreadnought. All hands, abandon ship." The bridge crew stared at him in shock, but quickly moved to comply. As the last escape pod jettisoned, Dennis stood alone on the empty bridge. The Vox behemoth loomed larger in the view screen. He closed his eyes, picturing Earth one last time. "Computer, initiate warp core overload." The Stormbreaker's engines flared as it accelerated towards its doom. In its final moments, Dennis thought of all those counting on him. "Give 'em hell," he whispered. The Stormbreaker struck the Vox dreadnought at full speed. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then both ships vanished in a blinding conflagration that ripped a hole in the Vox formation. Through that gap, the last remnants of the human Ullian fleet fled into the dark. They carried with them the spark of resistance that would...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.